Hey guys, Cormac here from Santa Barbara, California with my Rad Runner Mods video number 2. If you haven't seen the first one, I'll leave a link for it somewhere around here. Hopefully I know what I'm doing. In the first video I said I was just about done with the bike, and man was I totally kidding myself. Since then I've done so much more to it I'm going to share with you all today. To save you all a lot of time, I'm going to leave links for every single mod that I've purchased online in the video description, so you don't need to comment or ask where did you get this or where did I get that. So first things first, I recently finished the trifecta on a Rad bike. Obviously this voids the warranty, so do it at your own risk. And the trifecta is the motor, the controller, and a new battery. Those three things will give you a lot more torque, a lot more battery life, and probably some top speed. I'm not getting the top speed that some other people are getting with the similar setup, so either I got the wrong motor or my settings are a little funky. I'm still working on sorting that out. So first I want to start with the motor. It comes, as you probably know, Rad Power Bike ships with a 500 watt 48 volt Bafang motor with a peak output of 750 watts. Then if you get the true 750 watt, it has a peak output of, like, I've seen up to like 1600 on the controller so far. It was a pain in the butt and I didn't know what I was doing. I ordered the motor, and this is the disclaimer, I'm not sure if I ordered the correct motor off AliExpress. I probably didn't do my homework well enough, and when I got the motor, the length of the axle was about a ½ inch longer on the wired side where the freewheel attaches than the stock, which means getting this wheel, once you take out the guts of the old motor and put in the new motor, getting it into the dropouts of the bike was very, very challenging. I had to pry it open and just slam it in there. It was very, very tricky. And because the axle on the wired side where it connects to the battery was a ½ inch longer, the chain no longer lined up correctly. So I looked and I found an e-bike freewheel spacer that goes on the motor first, and then you put on a new freewheel. I wasn't able to get the original freewheel off the stock motor, so I just bought a new one, and that problem was solved. And then I lined up the chain okay, and then everything was working great. The next upgrade that I did was to get Bolton's 35 amp controller and the display with the taillight feature. I'm so sorry, I know there's so many of you that are still waiting for it. I'm sure in the current pandemic, things are still running pretty slow. I was probably the person that clicked on the link first, and I got it once they were available. Holy crap, it made a huge difference on the bike even before I put in a larger voltage and amp hour battery. The display is awesome. I'm still learning how to do the controls. I'll share my settings with you here. A quick mod I did on the display, because my kid rides up front, is I cut out some glass from an iPad, like tempered glass cover, and I put it over the controller. That way my kid ever gets mad at me and he wants to bash the controller, hopefully it won't shatter it. But this made a huge difference on top speed and how much wattage it can dump to that larger motor, right? One thing about it that I did notice that was a little weird is that even when the battery is off, and when you hit the brakes on the bike, the taillight goes off even when it's all off. So if you were to lean your bike against something, or maybe use one of those locks that locks the brake lock thing, your backlight is going to be on the whole time. So I don't have to worry about it because I store my bike not around too many other things, but just keep that in mind. All right, moving on. Next is the battery. Chris from Lightspeed Bikes, there'll be a link in the description, does great work. He's super popular, and his customer service is bar none. I ordered his Fat Shark 52 volt 21 amp hour battery, and I can confirm that it fits. I made a good difference, and it also comes with a Bluetooth BMS, so you can download an app and it'll show you how much percentage of battery you have left, and then you can even tweak all the settings on it. It's way beyond my my pay grade, but you can probably set it up to where it only ever charges the battery to 80 or 90%. That way you'll get a ton of life out of this battery. I live in a beach town, so I don't really have to go far. I don't commute too much with this bike, sometimes to work, but it's not very far. And my average ride is only 5 or 10 miles. So if this was fully charged, I can go probably a week without running it down. Obviously, if the battery dies completely, this is like a 90 to 100 pound bike now. And pedaling it on a single speed, because I increased the crank size, which I'll talk about in a second, is really not possible. But I live in a relatively flat town. If you live in a hilly town, make sure you're keeping an eye on how much battery you have left. So the battery got shipped out to me. I happened to get the controller at the same time. I set it all up, I slid the battery in, and then boom, there was this huge arc and a little bit of a flash. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I just bricked my bike. And as it turns out, the Rad connector, the XT90 connector that connects to the Bolton controller, the wires were crossed. This wasn't Chris's fault technically, because he built a great battery, but the little adapter that he purchased, he did not check those out. So I shipped it back to him. Of course, he paid for it and he fixed it because the terminals were actually melted on the cradle and the battery. And he shipped it right back out to me, and everything worked great. The bike was not damaged, thank God, because I'm clearly past the warranty period at this point. All right, so those three things made the biggest difference so far on the bike. Another disclaimer, if there's any other mods on here that you didn't see or I don't talk about, they're probably in the first video. One thing I forgot on the battery install, it fits stock. It comes for 3 bolts, but the Rad bike only has 2 bolts. So the third bolt should go in here, but there's nothing there. There's just a piece of plastic. So I poured some resin into that little space of the plastic, drilled it out, wait till it was nice and hard, and I was able to get a third bolt in there. And then also, you can't really see it, I put some foam tape wrapped around a small piece of wood, so when you really push the battery in and lock it, it's really, really snug in there and it's not going anywhere. I would dare someone to try and take this battery out without keys, because I also have to save my seat lock, which I talked about in the first video. Getting that battery out would be very, very challenging. Next up, the holy grail of the Rad Runner, because Rad doesn't offer one, is a front suspension. So a gentleman from Canada named Chris P, I will not try and hack your last name, brother, he was looking into it as well, and he found a supplier that could supply this very, very large, beefy snow bike, 20-inch tire, fat tire, front suspension fork. It has 60 millimeters of travel. I thought that would be a little bit much at first, but it has settled in a little bit, so it doesn't throw off the geometry from the stock look too much. Another disclaimer about this front fork. I have this funky kid seat on here, and so the tube length, and please believe I don't know the technical names on all of these things, the tube length is about 7/8 of an inch shorter than stock. And because I have this kid seat on here, Rad's big aluminum tapered collar, I had to shave it down and cut it so I could fit an extra spacer in there to put the kid seat in there. So my remedy was to put a stem riser in there, which I also liked because I'm 6'2", and I was hunching over a little bit, so this raised up the handlebars a little bit. My kid doesn't like it as much, but I'm super happy with it because it's more comfortable kind of sitting position. And other disclaimers on this front fork is that the front skewer, I have a front locking skewer on here, a security skewer. You're gonna need a longer skewer than stock. I can't tell you by how much, but you're gonna need one of those longer things. And then if you use the stem riser, that's gonna shorten the distance or lengthen the distance of the brake cable. So that'll put some tension on the brake. So you're probably gonna need a new brake cable, the housing, and the sheath for it. You can pick that up, and there's a link in the description for fairly cheap, 20 bucks on Amazon or at a local bike shop. But man, this made a huge difference on the bike. Normally I would keep stuff and adult beverages or whatever in this front basket here. This is just a milk crate purchased on Amazon. It would be rattling like crazy. Now it's really freaking smooth. I'm super happy with it. And this was kind of a game changer for the bike. Other than that, talk to Chris P. He is on the Rad Power users or Rad Power Upgrades Facebook group. And you can find him. His name is in the description to look for this front fork if you want to do that mod. Moving on, I get a lot of questions about this backrest. This was purchased on Amazon, and it has a very short base. So my plan, and there's probably a better way to do it, is that I bolted it to a longer steel plate, and I drilled the 2 holes into the frame and bolted it down. It seems to be pretty steady or solid so far. It hasn't bent too much. If it bends or breaks, I'm not gonna cry. I don't always have a passenger on here. Moving on, you can't see the picture from this angle, but I put on a 56 tooth crank. A lot of people complain because it's a single speed bike that once you're going past like 15 miles an hour or something like that, there's a lot of ghost pedaling where you're pedaling and it's not really doing anything except maybe tripping the pedal assist sensor. So I put that 56 on there and I noticed a big difference. Probably gives you a few more miles per hour. You can look it up online for the gearing and all that. And I do have a 58 tooth crank, but it won't fit with the stock chain. My chain tensioner is stupid tight right now. It's probably not going to last much longer the way I have it set up anyway. So when I put the 58 on, I'm definitely going to need to put on some links on the chain, or get a new chain. Moving on, as you can see, there's an ammo box here. This was also purchased on Amazon. Rad's front console is pretty cool, but it doesn't work with my kids sitting here. So I can put tools, adult beverages in there, super great. It's super simple hack, really. I just put some metal plates on the inside of the box and then bolted them in there with some washers. And then on this one, I put a bolt in there attached to a zip tie that has a loop on it. So that helps it not move left or right too much. Moving on, another thing some Rad Runner users found is that this spring goes bad. Mine has not yet, but I left a link there for some stronger, beefier strings. You can usually find them on Amazon or like Home Depot or something like that. And I can't recommend enough, if you're gonna do a lot of mods on this bike, you're gonna want a set of M6 bolts. I'll share the link in the video description as well, and possibly some spacers. I use some spacers here and some spacers actually on the front brakes. Talking about the brakes here, these are the Bolton's upgraded, the Junetech M1 hydraulic brakes. They're not hydraulic cable and brakes, they're just the brake portion of it. I noticed a more confident stopping power, but my brakes weren't adjusted very well in the beginning. I didn't know what I was doing. These made a huge difference, I feel. And the front brakes with this new suspension fork is going to require a spacer kit, probably like 1/2 inch spacers in there. And that's why spacers and these bolts do come in handy, because I've definitely had to cut bolts to different sizes to fit on all of these mods. Really quickly running through the locks, this is a beefy Abus U-lock, and this company called Alter, I gotta give a shout out to them. This is their Apex T, and this is actually 2 of them. They're not cheap locks. They are very expensive, they're very heavy, but they're made out of like titanium, and apparently this is the same lock used in their SAF lock, safe as the F word, which is this massive 13-pound, you lock it to something and leave it there, and it's angle grinder proof. And then according to the lock picking lawyer, if you're a fan of his, the cord of this is almost unpickable. There are only a few people in the world with the right tools to pick it. So this is super long. One of them will not work on the bike to lock it to itself because it's just too short, but 2 of these you can lock multiple bikes up, or you can lock this to something more stationary with total confidence. So shout out to Alter, they're awesome. Really quick, the helmet I use is a Burn helmet. You can put GoPro mounts on it. I'm a paraglider pilot, and so I've always liked Burn helmets. They're super fun because they have a little bit of a visor. I feel like they might be a little warmer if you live in a hot area, but they do a great job, and you can even buy them with the ear muffs if you live in a cold place. This bag, really quick here, is just the Alter lock bag. I put it right here because I can put an adult beverage in there, a GoPro, or my phone. Obviously, for those of you that have the controller display upgrade, there's a USB port here, and you can plug in anything you want into it. I plug in my iPhone and just throw it in the bag there so I know it's close. Other than that, that's all I can think of on the bike. If you have any other questions, sorry, one more thing, another mod. Last but not least, this is from MRI Denver. Before we were pulling our trailer with the dog in it, I just had the trailer mount on the rear axle, and a lot of people said that it's probably not good for the bike. A lot of pulling on the axle, eventually something's going to give. So MRI Denver, I left a link in the description, made this plated extender kind of thing here, a brace that you can attach your trailer to here, and it kind of distributes the pull around the frame of the bike instead of on the rear axle. One note to them that I did send, if you do order this and you have the passenger package on here, the 2 bolts that go right here are too short if you have this plastic plexiglass. Of course, I forgot one more thing. Real quick, this is the Pioneer hack that a Facebook user figured out. Basically, those are just quick links attached via zip tie with a little bit of foam tape around it, and they fit my Ortlib Pioneers just fine. Now I can say I'm hopefully done, but who knows? In 6 months, I'll probably come back to you with some more mods on it. But that's all I got. Thanks for your time.